Okay, so it's been coming up to 6 months since I left Australia. I want to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. What do I like about living overseas? What do I miss? Where have I been? What have I done? And what is it like leaving Australia? Now, everyone's going to have a different experience, but let me go through mine. In February, I went to Japan. And look, when I got there, it was still winter, but it was exciting. And I started with a month in Osaka, a week in Tokyo, and then a month in Okinawa. That is an island where it's pretty much warm all year round. And that was really beautiful. After that, I went to Vietnam and I spent 2 months there. I went to Hanoi for most of the time, and then I went and lived in Da Nang for a couple of weeks just to kind of test the waters. Now, right now, I've actually been in Bali and I've just extended my visa. I do have news. I am going back to Vietnam. So I made that decision because honestly, after coming to Bali, Vietnam is a lot cheaper. It's kind of the shock that when you leave Australia, you go on holiday and you come back home and buy something, you remember how goddamn expensive that country was. That's where I've been. Now, let's talk about how has it been, and is there anything that particularly I miss? There are certain things that are just harder to find. You just kind of take for granted when you're in Australia. Now, Australia does have a bit of convenience. That convenience always comes at a cost though. Now, look, let's start with Japan, because Japan certainly didn't have that problem. Japan was one of the places that, in a way, felt similar to Australia, only in the sense of you could get pretty much everything you wanted pretty easily. They had big malls, they had great public transportation. Actually, the public transport there puts anything in Australia to shame. You can just zip around the country by train, bullet train. You can go to another city within like 2 hours, something that might take you 10 hours in Australia. Getting around was certainly convenient. Eating out was very convenient. There was so many restaurants, great supermarkets, didn't have any issues there at all. Those are the things that you will find maybe in Indonesia or maybe in Vietnam harder to get. Just some of those Western things that you're so accustomed to. One thing, a bit of a fear that I had to get over was doctors. I always felt a bit iffy about going to doctors in other countries. And I think that's one thing people think about a lot. What happens if I get ill or sick or injure myself? And if you don't have travel insurance, because you might, if you're choosing to leave Australia and to live a life like this, you're not traveling, you are living overseas, and you can get healthcare. But let me talk about my experiences. So I actually had a bit of a sore throat, an infection or something when I was in Japan, and I just started my trip. I didn't want this to ruin my trip. I actually let it go a couple of weeks. I ended up going to the doctor there, and I made sure I did a bit of research, looked on the Google reviews, and found the right doctor that dealt with ear, nose, and throat. To my surprise, the doctors were amazing. It wasn't like Australia where they're just like, hey, let's check your heart and your pulse or whatever and, give you some Panadol or like refer you to another specialist. They sorted the problem then and there. I was tied to a bunch of machines and I was worried maybe I had cancer or something bad, and they checked for all of that then and there, put all my worries at ease. And I think from memory, I paid about 160 Australian dollars, and that included the doctor visit and the medicine. And they even gave me like a goodie bag of things. That was a great experience. Now, while I'm here in Bali, I've actually been having some back and neck pain. And once again, something I was putting off. Did my research and found a doctor. It was $50 for the consultation. And then I got 3 lots of medicine, and I paid $50 for that medicine. So all of my doctor's visit cost me 100 Australian dollars. So I actually thought that was pretty good. That's pretty much what you pay these days in Australia, even when you're like bulk billing half the price. Actually, when you include the medicine, even a little bit cheaper than that. So I just had to get over my fear of going to doctors in a different country. Now, sure, if you end up in hospital with a broken leg or arm or something like that, it is probably going to cost you more, and you probably should have health insurance. But if you're in that scenario, maybe don't take those risks, because at the end of the day, it's up to us whether we want to get travel insurance or health insurance. If you're going overseas, you are taking that risk. So I had an amazing time in Japan. There was so much to do, so much to see. It was convenient, easy to get around. People were friendly. There was absolutely no crime at all, or rubbish, because there is hardly any bins anywhere. And if you've been to Japan or seen the memes, that's one thing people always talk about. Overall, I absolutely love Japan. One thing that really surprised me was if you are paying actual local rent prices, it's actually pretty cheap. You can get a studio apartment for around 500 to 800 Australian dollars a month. So it's not as expensive as they say. Now, that was in Osaka. I actually preferred Osaka a lot more than Tokyo. So that's just my 2 cents. A lot of people, when they speak about Japan, they just kind of wish refer to Japan as Tokyo, but it is more than Tokyo. There are amazing cities, and Osaka was absolutely great. Okinawa as well was actually really, really affordable. My Airbnb there was half the price of Osaka. And while I was there, I actually haven't made any videos on it yet. I was doing some karate training. Now that I'm going to put in a video later. But all in all, don't have a single bad thing to say about Japan. I guess if I had to say one thing, it would probably be trying to find a community is probably a little bit harder than other countries. And that brings me to my next topic, Vietnam. Now, I went to Hanoi and Da Nang, and I actually did find making connections and making friends in Hanoi was really easy. And they certainly cater a lot more to Westerners than Japan does. I will say it does differ a little. Their supermarkets were a little harder to find certain things, but it was actually a lot easier than, say, a place like Indonesia. In Balinese supermarkets, it is very difficult to find maybe the Western things you want, and they will be extremely expensive. But no, Vietnam, they did have them, just not as big of a range. Now, I don't want to praise all these places. I would say there is one downside to living in Hanoi, and that is the pollution. It is a very polluted city. Now, if you can get past the pollution, other than that, I absolutely love it. It has a buzzing energy. There was always something to do and a great community. And I'm just going back there now and looking at apartments, and the ones I'm looking at, I've seen as cheap as 200 Australian dollars a month. Now, I'm not going to be getting one of those. I'm probably looking around the $400 to maybe $800 mark. I want to get something a bit more up to like Western standards, but the fact that you can get something so cheap absolutely blows my mind. So I'm going there just to relax, to kind of base myself for a while and focus on me. Because when you're traveling all the time, that is something that you can lose focus on. It's easy to drink a little more, it's easy to eat a little more, and it's harder to exercise when you're constantly on the go. So I just kind of want to stay in one place and kind of get my work done. Bali, on the other hand, I know it is a very popular option for especially young people to come. Honestly, I don't think it's all it's cracked up to be. But right now, I am on a place called Nusa Ceningan, and they have a sister island, Nusa Ceningan, and they're just connected by a little small bridge. And actually, here, I kind of love it. It's relaxed, it's beautiful. I am looking out over the ocean and some palm trees, and sitting in a comfy little swing chair. 6 months in to, how do I feel about leaving? Honestly, it's winter there, and I think I feel pretty good right now, considering what I'm looking at. Honestly, if I had to say I missed one thing about Australia, it would be the supermarkets. Definitely not the prices, but just the convenience that you can get the things that you're accustomed to. Other than that, no, I don't really miss anything. I sometimes wish more of my friends were here, but actually most of my friends live in Europe. So if they came here, that would be great. The Australian ones, they can stay in Australia, to be honest. that is my 6-month update. So I will keep soldering on, making content and entertaining you. Until next time.